The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the kind of self-important chatter that only comes from beings who've convinced themselves they run the universe. Floating in their various atmospheric bubbles, breathing apparatus and gravity fields, the representatives of 47 different species had gathered for what they considered a matter of utmost importance. Chancellor Blorth, a purple blob with too many eyes and an even bigger ego, slammed his ceremonial gavel against the crystalline podium. The sound echoed through translators, coming out as everything from musical chimes to aggressive clicking, depending on your species. Order. Order in the assembly. Blorth's voice gurgled through the universal translator with all the authority of a middle manager who just discovered someone was using the office coffee machine without contributing to the fund. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed a sector map of the galaxy's outer rim, with one tiny red dot blinking ominously near the edge of civilized space. As you can see, Blorth continued, the humans have established an unauthorized presence in Sector 7 Alpha 12. This is clearly a violation of Galactic Ordinance 4892b, subsection 15, paragraph 847, which states that primitive species must request permission before establishing any permanent structures outside their designated quarantine zone. A chittering voice from the insectoid delegation piped up. Surely you mean the amended version from Cycle 2847? Ordinance 4892b was superseded by the Primitive Species Containment Act. Actually, interrupted Ambassador Krill Knox, whose species looked like someone had crossed a crab with a filing cabinet. I believe you're referring to the Primitive Species Management Protocol, which replaced the Containment Act after the Zorblex incident. Blorth's eyes rotated in what could charitably be called annoyance. The specific ordinance number is irrelevant. The point is, these monkeys have no business setting up shop in our territory. From the back of the chamber, a deep, rumbling voice cut through the bureaucratic noise like a plasma cannon through tissue paper. With respect, Chancellor, perhaps we're overcomplicating this situation. All eyes, sensors, and assorted visual organs turned toward Admiral Vex'tar of the Draconian Empire. If Central Casting had been looking for someone to play intimidating Space Lizard number 1, Vex'tar would have gotten the part without an audition. 8 feet tall, covered in scales that seemed to absorb light, and sporting enough battle scars to tell a dozen war stories, he was the kind of being that made other species check their insurance policies. Admiral Vex'tar, Blorth acknowledged with the tone of someone who really wished they were talking to anyone else. You have something to contribute? Vex'tar's laugh sounded like rocks being crushed in a cement mixer. Contribute? Chancellor, I'm offering to solve your problem entirely. These humans have one small research station, correct? No military presence, no defensive capabilities, probably just a handful of scientists poking at rocks and taking pictures of stars. The holographic display zoomed in on the human outpost. It looked exactly like what you'd expect from a budget research facility. A collection of prefabricated modules connected by covered walkways, a few communication arrays, and what appeared to be a landing pad that had seen better days. My Armada is currently conducting training exercises in the Rigel system, Vex'tar continued, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never met a problem he couldn't solve with superior firepower. 200 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts and my flagship, the Stellar Dominance. We could be at this human outpost within 48 standard hours. The chamber fell silent except for the various mechanical sounds of life support systems and the occasional diplomatic cough. You're suggesting military action against a research station? Asked Ambassador Trillpack, whose species had evolved from something that looked like a cross between a flower and a nervous system. Isn't that somewhat excessive? Vex'tar's tail, which had been slowly swishing behind him, suddenly went rigid. Excessive? Ambassador, these primitives have violated galactic law. They've ignored our sovereignty and established an unauthorized presence in our territory. If we allow this to stand, every upstart species with a rocket and a dream will think they can do whatever they please. He gestured toward the holographic display with one clawed hand. Besides, look at it. It's clearly a scouting operation. Today it's a research station, tomorrow it's a military outpost, and next thing you know, they're claiming mineral rights to half the sector. Chancellor Blorth's eyes swiveled as he considered the proposal. On one hand, sending a military armada to deal with a research station seemed like using a photon torpedo to kill a space fly. On the other hand, the humans had been getting increasingly uppity lately, and a show of force might be exactly what the galaxy needed to remind everyone who was really in charge. "Very well," Blorth announced, his voice carrying the weight of bureaucratic inevitability. "Admiral Vex'tar, you are hereby authorized to proceed to the human outpost and demand their immediate withdrawal from Galactic Council territory. If they refuse..." He paused dramatically. "You are authorized to use whatever force you deem necessary to remove them." Vex'tar's grin revealed rows of teeth that evolution had clearly designed for serious violence. "It will be my pleasure, Chancellor. I estimate this will take approximately 6 hours from arrival to complete resolution." As the various delegates began discussing the finer points of interspecies incident reports and territorial violation protocols, Admiral Vex'tar was already mentally composing his victory speech. After all, how hard could it be to intimidate a few human scientists? Research Station Echo 7 sat in the void like a collection of tin cans that someone had welded together during a particularly optimistic weekend project. Solar panels that had seen better decades caught what little starlight filtered through the dust clouds, while communication arrays that looked like they'd been assembled from spare parts pointed hopefully toward Earth. Inside the station's maintenance section, Jake Murphy was having what could generously be called a philosophical discussion with a coffee machine. "Look, you piece of overpriced space junk," Jake muttered, elbow deep in the machine's inner workings. "All I want is one cup of coffee that doesn't taste like it was filtered through a gym sock. Is that too much to ask?" The coffee machine, being an inanimate object, chose not to respond. This was probably wise, as Jake had a reputation for creative problem-solving that occasionally involved percussive maintenance. Jake Murphy looked exactly like what you'd get if you crossed a middle-aged mechanic with someone who'd given up caring about dress codes sometime around the Clinton administration. His hair was the kind of brown that had long ago made peace with gray, his jumpsuit had enough patches to qualify as a quilt, and his expression suggested he'd seen enough of the universe's nonsense to last several lifetimes. The proximity alarm chose that moment to start its obnoxious beeping, which sounded like a smoke detector having an anxiety attack. "Oh, come on," Jake sighed, wiping his hands on a rag that had probably been white sometime during the previous century. "What now? What now?" He shuffled over to the main console, which displayed the kind of user interface that made you nostalgic for Windows 95. A red blinking dot had appeared on the edge of the sensor range, accompanied by text that simply read, "Multiple large objects detected. Classification, unknown." Jake squinted at the screen, then picked up the coffee-stained manual that sat next to the console. After flipping through several pages of warnings about not using the microwave to dry wet clothing, he found the section he was looking for. "Multiple large objects," he read aloud. "Could indicate asteroid field, space debris, or hostile fleet." He looked back at the screen, where the single red dot had now become approximately 200 red dots. Yeah, that's probably not asteroids. The communication system crackled to life with the kind of static that suggested someone was trying very hard to reach him from very far away. "Echo 7, this is Earth Command. Do you copy?" "Echo 7, please respond immediately." Jake reached over and hit the transmit button with the enthusiasm of someone answering a telemarketing call during dinner. "Yeah, this is Echo 7. What's up, Earth Command?" "Jake, thank God. We're showing a massive fleet heading your way. Are you seeing this on your sensors?" Jake glanced back at the screen, where the red dots had organized themselves into what looked suspiciously like an attack formation. "Yep, got about 200 contacts heading this way. Pretty impressive light show, actually." There was a pause that lasted long enough for Jake to wonder if the transmission had cut out. When Earth Command came back online, the voice had climbed about 3 octaves. 200? "Jake, that's not a patrol. That's an invasion fleet. You need to evacuate immediately." Jake replied, popping open a can of soda that had been sitting on his desk since approximately the Mesozoic era. "I'm kind of in the middle of something here. This coffee machine is being particularly stubborn today." "Jake, listen to me very carefully. You are about to be visited by what appears to be the entire Draconian battle fleet. This is not a drill. This is not a training exercise, and this is definitely not the time to worry about coffee." Jake took a sip of his ancient soda and made a face. You know, for a species that supposedly conquered half the galaxy, you'd think they'd have better timing. I just got the artificial gravity working in Section C, and if I leave now, it'll probably break again. Jake. The voice from Earth Command had now reached frequencies that were probably causing dogs to howl in nearby solar systems. This is Admiral Harrison. Do you remember me? We served together on the Titan project? Jake's expression shifted slightly, like someone who just remembered where they left their car keys. Oh, hey, Admiral. Yeah, I remember you. You still worried about everything? Or have you learned to relax in your old age? Relaxed? Jake, there's a fleet of warships heading your way that could turn your station into component atoms, and you're talking about coffee machines. Admiral, with all due respect, I've been maintaining this tin can for 3 years. I've dealt with life support failures, reactor meltdowns, a plague of space mice that somehow learned to use tools, and a food processor that achieved sentience and demanded voting rights. A bunch of cranky lizards and spaceships doesn't even crack my top 10 list of problems. The sensor array chose that moment to beep again, indicating the approaching fleet had moved from distant concern to immediate neighborhood. Jake glanced at the display and nodded approvingly. Actually, I take that back. They've got some nice ships, very symmetrical formation. You don't see craftsmanship like that anymore. Jake. Null endo. Admiral Harrison's voice had now taken on the tone of someone trying to talk a cat down from a very tall tree. I need you to understand something. The reason you're the only person on that station is because everyone else evacuated when we detected the fleet. You were supposed to leave with them. Yeah, about that, Jake replied, pulling out a work order that looked like it had been through a paper shredder and then reassembled by someone with very poor eyesight. Dr. Peterson left me a list of things to fix before I locked up, 17 items, and I'm only up to number 3. You know how I feel about leaving a job half-finished. The proximity alarm's beeping had now reached a frequency that suggested the approaching fleet was close enough to count individual ships without using telescopes. Besides, Jake added, someone's got to be here to meet our visitors. It would be rude to just leave them hanging out there in space. The Bridge of the Stellar Dominance was everything you'd expect from a ship designed by a species that believed intimidation was the highest form of diplomacy. Dark metal surfaces reflected red lighting that pulsed in time with the ship's heartbeat like power systems, while holographic displays showed tactical information in colors that suggested violence was not just an option, but a preferred solution. Admiral Vex'tar stood at the center of it all, his clawed hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the approaching human outpost through the main viewer. His bridge crew, a collection of Draconians who looked like they'd been recruited from a particularly aggressive rugby team, worked at their stations with the efficient brutality that had made their species the galaxy's go-to choice for hostile takeovers. Admiral reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Vex'tar, "We are within optimal intimidation range of the human facility." Vex'tar's tail swished with satisfaction. "Excellent. Open a channel to the outpost. Let's see how quickly these primitives can grovel." The main viewer shifted to show the exterior of Research Station Echo 7, which looked even less impressive up close. Someone had apparently tried to paint racing stripes on one of the habitat modules, and there was what appeared to be a small garden growing in one of the observation domes. "Channel open, Admiral," reported the communications officer. Vex'tar drew himself up to his full, impressive height, spread his arms in a gesture calculated to display maximum menace, and activated his most intimidating voice. "Attention, human facility. I am Admiral Vex'tar of the Draconian Imperial Navy, commanding a fleet of 200 warships. You have violated Galactic Council territory and must surrender immediately." The response came almost immediately, but it wasn't quite what anyone on the bridge had expected. "Please hold while I connect you to the next available representative. Your call is important to us." Vex'tar's expression went through several rapid changes as his brain tried to process what he'd just heard. What did they just say? "I believe, Admiral," said Lieutenant Vex'tar, consulting his translation matrix, "they have placed us in a waiting queue." Soft music began playing over the communication channel. It sounded like the kind of jazz that gets played in elevators when they want you to feel sophisticated about being trapped in a small metal box. "They put us on hold," Vex'tar said slowly, as if saying it out loud might make it make more sense. They put the Draconian Imperial Navy on hold. The music continued for another 30 seconds before a human voice came back on the line. Thank you for holding. This is Jake. Before we get started, can I just confirm that you're not calling about your starship's extended warranty? Because I've got to tell you, we get a lot of those calls. And honestly, most of those warranty programs are complete scams. Lieutenant Vex'tar looked at his admiral with the expression of someone whose worldview had just been turned inside out and shaken vigorously. Sir, I don't think he realizes we're here to conquer his station. Human. Vex'tar roared, loud enough to make several bridge officers wince. I am not calling about a warranty. I am Admiral Vex'tar. I command 200 warships. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences. There was a brief pause, during which the bridge crew could hear what sounded like someone taking a sip of something. 200 warships, huh? That's actually pretty impressive. Most folks only call with complaints about 1 or 2 ships. What seems to be the problem with yours? Problem? Vex'tar's voice had reached levels that were probably violating several noise ordinances. The only problem is that you're about to become a cloud of superheated plasma. Okay, no need to shout. I can hear you just fine. Look, Mr. Vex'tar, was it? I appreciate you taking the time to call, but I'm actually pretty busy right now. I've got a coffee machine that's refusing to cooperate, a gravity generator that keeps playing classical music for some reason, and somebody apparently thought it was funny to reprogram the bathroom door to only open for knock-knock jokes. The Draconian bridge crew exchanged glances that suggested they were beginning to question their career choices. So if you want to schedule an appointment to discuss your fleet's issues, I've got some time open next Thursday around 2 o'clock. Assuming we're talking standard galactic time, and not that weird Rigelian calendar system that nobody understands. Vex'tar stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, as his brain tried to process the fact that he was apparently being scheduled like a dental appointment. Admiral, whispered his sensor officer, I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from the station. Define unusual, Vex'tar managed to say without taking his eyes off the view screen. Well, sir, according to our scans, their power output is approximately 10 times what it should be for a facility of that size. Also, I'm reading what appears to be a significant gravitational anomaly in their waste processing section. On the communication channel, Jake's voice continued cheerfully. You know what, Mr. Vex'tar, you seem like a nice enough guy, despite the whole turning people into plasma thing. Tell you what. Why don't you and your fleet just hang out there for a few minutes while I finish up with this coffee machine? Then we can have a proper chat about whatever's bothering you. Human, Vex'tar said, his voice now carrying the tone of someone who was beginning to suspect the universe was playing an elaborate practical joke on him. Do you understand that I can destroy your entire station with a single command? Oh sure, I get that a lot. But here's the thing, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but I'm having kind of a busy day. So unless your fleet is on fire or something, you're just going to have to wait your turn like everyone else. The line went silent except for the sound of what appeared to be someone banging on metal with a wrench. Sir, said the sensor officer, his voice carrying the kind of concern usually reserved for discovering that your house is on fire and the fire department is on strike, those energy readings are increasing. Whatever they're doing over there, it's drawing a lot of power. Vex'tar stared at the human outpost, which continued to look like exactly the kind of ramshackle research facility that should have surrendered immediately upon seeing his fleet. Instead, it was apparently putting him on hold while someone fixed a coffee machine. Lieutenant Vex'tar, he said slowly, in your military experience, is this normal behavior for a species that's about to be conquered? No, sir, Vex'tar replied. Most species either surrender immediately or start shooting. I've never seen anyone try to schedule us. The communication channel crackled back to life. Okay, good news and bad news. Good news is I think I figured out what's wrong with the coffee machine. Bad news is it's going to take me another few minutes to fix it. You guys mind waiting a bit longer? Admiral Vex'tar had reached that special point in a military commander's career where the universe stops making sense, and you start questioning whether you should have listened to your mother and become an accountant instead. His fleet of 200 warships sat in perfect formation around a human research station, whose lone occupant had just asked them to wait while he fixed his coffee machine. "Admiral," Lieutenant Vex'tar said carefully, "perhaps we should simply open fire and end this charade." Vex'tar considered this for a moment. It would certainly be simpler than trying to figure out why a primitive human was treating the Draconian Imperial Navy like a customer service inquiry. But something about those unusual energy readings was bothering him. "A human," he called over the communication channel. "Your time is up. Surrender now or face immediate destruction." Jake's voice came back with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans. "You know what, Mr. Vex'tar? I appreciate your patience, but I'm starting to think you're not really interested in scheduling an appointment. Are you maybe here for something else?" "Yes. I am here for your unconditional surrender." "Ah, gotcha. Well, that's going to be a problem, because I'm actually not authorized to surrender anything. I'm just the maintenance guy. Dr. Peterson, she's the one in charge, but she's back on Earth at a conference about xenogeology or something equally exciting." Vex'tar's tail lashed in frustration. Then who is authorized to surrender this facility? "Hey, that's a good question. Probably need to check the manual for that one." There was the sound of pages rustling. "Let's see. Emergency protocols, evacuation procedures, coffee machine warranty information. Ah, here we go. Facility surrender authorization. Says here that in the absence of the commanding officer, facility surrender can only be authorized by, oh, this is awkward. What? Says it can only be authorized by someone with a Class 7 security clearance or higher. And, well, I'm just maintenance. I've got a Class 2 clearance, which basically means I can fix toilets and operate the coffee machine. Well, when it's working anyway." On the bridge of the Stellar Dominance, several officers were beginning to develop the kind of headaches usually associated with trying to understand tax law. "This is ridiculous," Vex'tar roared. "I don't care about your bureaucracy. Surrender or be destroyed." "Look, Mr. Vex'tar, I understand you're frustrated, but I can't just ignore proper procedure. What if Dr. Peterson came back and found out I'd surrendered the station without authorization? I'd probably lose my coffee privileges." "Your coffee privileges?" "Oh yeah, good coffee is hard to come by out here. Most of the stuff we get tastes like it was made from recycled boot leather." Speaking of which, the sound of machinery humming came over the channel. "There we go. Finally got this piece of junk working again." Vex'tar was beginning to understand why his species had never bothered trying to negotiate with humans before. They were clearly insane. "Fine," he said, making what he assumed would be his final attempt at diplomacy. "If you cannot surrender, then I will simply have to remove you by force. Prepare to be boarded." "Oh well, if you're planning to come aboard, I should probably mention that we're in the middle of some routine maintenance. Things might get a little messy." "What kind of maintenance?" Jake's voice took on the tone of someone reading from a checklist. "Let's see, I've got the garbage disposal system running a full cleaning cycle, the pest control drones are doing their weekly patrol, and I think the automatic sprinkler system is due for a test. You might want to reschedule for next week." "Admiral," the sensor officer called out, his voice tight with concern, "I'm reading massive energy spikes from multiple sections of the station. Whatever they're doing over there, it's drawing enormous amounts of power." Vex'tar gestured dismissively. "It's a research station. They're probably running some primitive experiments." The first sign that this assessment might be incorrect came when one of his scout ships, which had moved in for a closer look at the station, simply vanished. Not exploded. Not destroyed. Vanished, as if it had never existed at all. "What just happened to Scout 7? Vex'tar demanded. His tactical officer stared at his instruments with the expression of someone whose reality had just been thoroughly violated. "Sir, according to sensors, Scout 7 encountered some kind of gravitational anomaly near the station's waste processing facility. The ship appears to have been compressed." "Compressed?" "Nah, into a point approximately the size of a marble, sir." Jake's voice came over the communication channel, sounding mildly apologetic. "Sorry about that, folks. Forgot to mention that the garbage disposal creates a small temporal vortex when it's running. Tends to suck in anything that gets too close. Usually just space debris, but I guess your ship was small enough to get caught in the field." You destroyed one of my ships with a garbage disposal? Well, destroyed is kind of a strong word. It's more like it got really compressed. The matter's still there, technically, just in a much more compact form. Before Vex'tar could respond to this information, alerts began sounding throughout his flagship as more ships reported contact with what appeared to be small, fast-moving objects. Admiral, called his weapons officer. We're being attacked by, I'm not sure what to call them. They appear to be small automated units, but they're slicing through our hull plating like it's made of tissue paper. Jake's voice remained conversationally cheerful. Oh, those are just the pest control drones. They're designed to eliminate any unwanted biological contaminants that might threaten the station's ecosystem. Don't take it personally, they're just doing their job. Pest control? Vex'tar watched on his tactical display as dozens of his smaller ships began reporting hull breaches from what appeared to be a swarm of maintenance robots. You're attacking my fleet with pest control drones? Attack is such an ugly word. Think of it more as aggressive cleaning. The bridge shook as something impacted the Stellar Dominance's shields. Through the viewports, Vex'tar could see streams of what looked like water hitting his ships. Sir, reported his defensive systems officer. We're being hit by some kind of liquid projectiles. Temperature readings indicate it's superheated to approximately 15,000 degrees. That's just the sprinkler system, Jake explained helpfully. It's designed to put out fires, but I may have set the temperature a little high. Safety first, you know. Can't be too careful when dealing with potential fire hazards. Admiral Vex'tar watched as his mighty fleet, which had successfully conquered 17 star systems and defeated the combined navies of 3 different species, was being systematically dismantled by what appeared to be household appliances. This is impossible, he muttered. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet, Jake replied. I haven't even turned on the vacuum cleaner. The bridge of the Stellar Dominance had taken on the atmosphere of a disaster movie, specifically the part where everyone realizes the disaster is much worse than they initially thought and also probably unstoppable. Warning lights flashed in colors that the Draconian language had 17 different words for, each describing a different shade of impending doom. Damage report. Admiral Vex'tar barked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Lieutenant Kreshtar consulted his tactical display with the expression of someone reading his own obituary. We've lost 47 ships to the gravity anomaly, another 38 to the cleaning drones, and 15 more to what the humans are calling their sprinkler system. The remaining ships are reporting various degrees of damage ranging from significant to please send help. And we haven't fired a single shot, Vex'tar said, more to himself than to his crew. Actually, sir, we did fire several shots, but they seem to have been absorbed by some kind of defensive field around the station. Jake's voice crackled over the communication system, still maintaining that infuriatingly casual tone. Hey, Mr. Vex'tar, you still there? I wanted to let you know that I'm about to start the vacuum cleaner, so you might want to move your bigger ships back a bit. This thing has some serious suction. What? Vex'tar asked with the careful pronunciation of someone whose sanity was hanging by a very thin thread. Exactly is your vacuum cleaner? Oh, it's pretty standard maintenance equipment. Keeps the station clean by removing unwanted debris from the surrounding area. The effective range is only about 50,000 kilometers, so you should be fine if you back up a little. 50,000 kilometers was approximately the distance his entire fleet was currently spread across. Admiral, his sensor officer called out, I'm detecting a massive energy buildup from the station. Power levels are off the charts. All ships, retreat to a safe distance immediately. Vex'tar ordered, but even as he said it, he realized he had no idea what constituted a safe distance from a space station that apparently used black holes for garbage disposal. The retreat was not what anyone would call orderly. Ships that had spent years training in perfect formation maneuvers suddenly found themselves fleeing from a collection of prefabricated modules like startled fish escaping a shark. The mighty Draconian fleet, which had struck fear into the hearts of countless civilizations, was running away from one human and his household appliances. This is insane. Vex'tar shouted into the communication channel. What are you? What kind of research station is this? Jake's response carried a note of what might have been amusement. Research station? Oh, that's funny. Who told you this was a research station? Our own databases. Galactic shipping records. This facility is listed as Human Research Outpost Echo 7, dedicated to xenogeological studies and deep space observation. Yeah, about that, Jake said. And for the first time, his voice carried a hint of something that wasn't casual friendliness. That's what we call a cover story, Mr. Vex'tar. This isn't a research station. The vacuum cleaner activated with a sound like reality being turned inside out. 3 of Vex'tar's heavy cruisers, despite being at what should have been a safe distance, suddenly found themselves being pulled inexorably toward the station. What is it then? Vex'tar demanded, watching his ship struggle against forces that made no sense according to any known physics. Well, I suppose there's no point in keeping it secret anymore. This is testing facility Echo 7, and I'm not really a maintenance guy. I mean, I do maintain things, but that's not my primary job. One of the cruisers managed to break free from the vacuum's pull, but not before losing its outer hull plating, which was now presumably taking up residence in whatever passed for the station's dust collection system. My name is Jake Murphy, and I'm a senior defense systems engineer for the Earth Colonial Engineering Corps. I designed most of the systems you've been dealing with today. You're a weapons designer? Weapons? That's kind of harsh. I prefer to think of them as extremely aggressive household appliances. The garbage disposal that creates micro black holes, the pest control drones with monomolecular cutting edges, the sprinkler system that fires superheated plasma, the vacuum cleaner that generates localized space-time distortions. All perfectly normal maintenance equipment, if you happen to be maintaining a facility that occasionally needs to defend itself against hostile alien fleets. Admiral Vex'tar felt something that might have been respect, if respect could be mixed with terror and a growing understanding that his military career was probably over. How many of these facilities does your species have? Jake was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, there was definitely amusement in his voice. Well, that would be telling, wouldn't it? Let's just say that when humanity decided to expand into the galaxy, we thought it might be wise to have a few contingency plans scattered around. You know, just in case we ran into unfriendly neighbors. You're telling me that Earth has hidden weapons platforms disguised as research stations throughout the galaxy? I'm not telling you anything, Mr. Vex'tar. I'm just a maintenance guy who happens to be very good at fixing things. And right now, what needs fixing is the relationship between your fleet and the structural integrity of your ships. As if to emphasize the point, the vacuum cleaner powered down, releasing the remaining cruisers to limp away with whatever dignity they had left. I'm going to make you an offer, Jake continued. You and your fleet can turn around and head back to wherever you came from, and we'll call this whole thing a training exercise. No harm, no foul, no need to mention to your superiors that you got your tail kicked by a human janitor. Vex'tar looked around his damaged bridge, counted the ships he'd lost to household appliances, and came to a decision that would probably save his career, if not his life. All ships, prepare for immediate departure. Set course for home base, maximum speed. Wise choice, Admiral, Jake said. And hey, if you're ever in the neighborhood again, feel free to stop by. I'll make sure to have the coffee ready. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had convened with the kind of urgency usually reserved for situations involving exploding stars or tax audits. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy tried to process the reports they'd received from Admiral Vex'tar's fleet. Chancellor Blorth floated at his podium, looking like someone who had just discovered that his insurance policy didn't cover acts of human stupidity. The holographic display showed what remained of the Draconian Armada limping back toward their home territory, roughly half the size it had been when it left. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings. Blorth began, his voice carrying all the authority of someone who was desperately trying to maintain control of a situation that had already spiraled completely out of hand. We have received Admiral Vex'tar's preliminary report on the human situation. A collective murmur ran through the assembly, the kind of sound that large groups make when they're all thinking the same thing but nobody wants to be the first to say it out loud. According to the Admiral's report, Blorth continued, consulting a datapad that looked like it had been handled by someone with very sweaty palms. The human facility in question was not, in fact, a simple research station. Ambassador Trillpack, whose flower-like appearance was currently wilted with stress, raised what might have been a hand. Chancellor, the report mentions something about garbage disposals that create black holes. Surely that's some kind of translation error? Blorth's eyes rotated in what was becoming a familiar expression of barely contained panic. "I'm afraid not, Ambassador. Our linguists have triple-checked the translation matrix. The humans appear to have disguised military-grade weapons as household appliances." The insectoid delegation began chittering among themselves in what sounded like the insect equivalent of nervous laughter. One of them, whose name was unpronounceable in most languages and sounded like someone dropping cutlery down a flight of stairs, spoke up. "Chancellor, are we to understand?" The insectoid delegate continued, his mandibles clicking nervously, "that this single human defeated our most advanced battle fleet using what our intelligence reports describe as stuff he had lying around the house?" The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet that occurs when an entire galactic government collectively realizes they might need to update their resumes. Chancellor Blorth cleared what might have been his throat, though with his species it was hard to tell. "The situation is complex. Admiral Vex'tar's report indicates that the human in question—" He consulted his data pad again. "One Jake Morrison appears to be completely unaware that he possesses what can only be described as a fortress of mass destruction disguised as a modest living space." Unaware? Ambassador Trillpack's petals had now fully closed, which in her species indicated either deep meditation or the early stages of a nervous breakdown. How can someone be unaware they own weapons capable of disabling dreadnoughts? "According to our intelligence," Blorth said, his voice taking on the tone of someone who was beginning to question the very nature of reality, "Mr. Morrison appears to believe he simply has really good appliances. Our xenobiologists theorize that humans may have evolved some kind of unconscious ability to weaponize their domestic environment as a survival mechanism." Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jake Morrison was blissfully unaware that he had just become the most feared individual in the known galaxy. He was sitting at his kitchen table, enjoying what he considered to be a perfectly normal Tuesday morning coffee and reading the news on his tablet. "Ha," he said to himself, scrolling through the headlines, "another one of those weird meteor shower reports. Third one this month. You'd think NASA would have better tracking systems by now." He took another sip of his coffee brewed by a machine that 3 different galactic civilizations now classified as a Class VI reality manipulation device and glanced out his window. In the distance, he could see what looked like a small aircraft circling his neighborhood, though it seemed to be keeping a respectful distance. Probably just some traffic helicopter. Jake mused, completely failing to notice that the helicopter was actually a Galactic Council reconnaissance probe, piloted by the bravest, or most expendable, volunteer they could find, whose job was to monitor Jake's activities from what they hoped was a safe distance. The probe pilot, a nervous Centaurian named Ziploc, was currently sending real-time reports back to the Council. "Target appears to be consuming a dark liquid from a ceramic vessel," Ziploc reported, his voice tight with tension. "Unknown if this is some kind of ritual preparation for combat." Back in the Galactic Assembly, the mood was growing increasingly grim. Representative Glubb, nor of the Aquatic Federation, whose species communicated primarily through bioluminescent patterns, was flashing what roughly translated to "We are all going to die horribly." "The question before us," Chancellor Blorth said, trying to project an air of calm leadership while internally screaming, "is how we proceed. Do we attempt diplomatic contact? Do we evacuate this entire sector of space? Do we pretend this never happened and hope the human doesn't notice us?" The last option was gaining surprising support among the Assembly. "If I may," came a voice from the back of the hall. It belonged to Professor Quill Met, the galaxy's leading expert on primitive civilizations, who looked like he hadn't slept in several cycles. "I've been analyzing the humans' behavioral patterns from our surveillance data. I believe we may be approaching this situation entirely wrong." The Assembly turned to look at him with the kind of desperate hope usually reserved for people lost in the desert who think they've spotted an oasis. "Continue," Professor Blorth said. "From what I can observe, this human Jake Morrison appears to operate under what I can only describe as benign ignorance. He genuinely believes his environment is normal. More importantly, he seems to have no aggressive intentions whatsoever. His primary concerns appear to be maintaining his living space, consuming caffeine, and something called Netflix." "Netflix?" Ambassador Trillpack asked, her petals cautiously beginning to open. "Some form of entertainment distribution system. The point is, as long as we don't threaten him or his property, He appears to pose no danger to anyone. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the assembly, followed immediately by a wave of renewed panic as someone asked the obvious follow-up question. But what if someone does threaten him? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several delegates quietly beginning to draft evacuation plans for their home systems. Back on Earth, Jake finished his coffee and stood up, stretching. He had a pretty normal day planned, some lighthouse work, maybe finally fix that squeaky door hinge, perhaps reorganize his garage. The Galactic Council, had they known about these plans, would have immediately issued a galaxy-wide state of emergency. Fortunately for everyone's peace of mind, they didn't. At least not yet.